Suga Sean versus Petr Yan. Guys, I did a poll. I was on YouTube and I just did a poll, okay? Now, right now, DraftKings is separating these guys in terms of odds. 3-1 favorite for Yan. 3-1 favorite. He's 3 times more likely to beat Suga Sean than the other way around. And my poll told you that, and I followed it with a question to say, do you agree with that? It's not to say who you think is going to win. Do you think that those odds, do you think there's a discrepancy in the skills? Do you think this is an easy fight for Petr Yan? It was overwhelming. You guys agreed with it. It should be 3-1. Overwhelming. Now, I'm going to superimpose that you believe that this is going to be a stand-up battle and that Yan can get to the target, get inside, rough him up, and beat him up. Raise your hand. Did I just describe what you think is going to happen? Okay, then you're talking about a finish. I mean, you're telling me a guy is 3 times better than another guy, and you're telling me the fight's going to be on their feet. Guys that get overwhelmed on their feet by somebody 3 times better than them don't make it the distance. Is that accurate? Is that what you're telling me? Am I interpreting this wrong? You think there's going to be a stand-up battle that Sean can't even defend himself? 3-1 spread. I mean, I asked you very directly. Not do you think Petr should be the favorite? Do you think he should be 3-1? Overwhelmingly, 68% of you said yes. That surprises me. And why are we so convinced it's going to be a stand-up battle? Rhetorical question. Of course I know the answer. That's what Petr Yan likes to do. That's what Suga Sean likes to do. Now, if you go look at their records, they both have these really beautiful records. But if you look a little bit closer for finishes, for submissions, who went the decision, who's been out there more rounds, like there's some stuff that does get skewed pretty heavily in Petr Yan's favor. But ultimately, you're going to come down to the most basic question of who had harder competition. And if you wanted to go by rankings and accomplishments, of course you're going to give that to Petr Yan. But why would that make him better? What does that encourage? I mean, that's going to happen later within the same night. Islam, who's 16-1, is going to be taking on Oliveira, who's lost 8 times just in the UFC, and that's just off the top of my head. Oliveira lost 8 times just in the UFC. But the argument is made that Oliveira's schedule, his losses as well as his victories, over much superior fighters than Islam. And I have to tell you, on its face, from a logical standpoint, I fully understand. Don't think that you need to explain this to me. This guy's been in there with tougher guys, and therefore he's getting better. I understand the logic of it. I just don't know what fighter you're going to get to agree with you. If I could have 20 wins and 8 losses, but man, it was just studs. I just took on a bunch of studs. Or I could be 17-0. I will take 17-0. Yeah, but those 17 are all against tomato cans. I will take the 17-0, and so would you. And if you're dealing with somebody who's got 8 losses, 8 of them by submission, versus a guy who's never been submitted, even if he took on easier opponents. I saw the logic to your argument of the schedules being tougher, but don't you see the logic to mine? Wouldn't you be interested in who has less wear on them? Wouldn't you be interested in the one that hasn't learned how to lose because it hasn't happened to him yet? Wouldn't you believe in ideas like momentum? And it's very tough. Like the story on Sean O'Malley is changing without Sean doing anything. I mean, the story on Suga Sean is that he doesn't fight anybody. Doesn't fight anybody tough. Now, he did everything he could do to get top opponents, but he doesn't have to work overly hard because he's already got the feature placement. He's on the top of the bill. You're on the top of the bill, keep your mouth shut. You've done something right. He doesn't need somebody else coming after him. He did what his job is, which is to get your attention and the respect of the promoter. But in all fairness, Sean did still ask for top guys. They didn't give them to him. I mean, that's the story of Sean, right? You guys have heard this 100 times. I'm repeating things to you. Yeah, but not so fast. All of a sudden, the idea that Suga Sean never got in there with anybody has changed. Now that Chito Vera is ranked number 3 and possibly even the sitting reigning number 1 contender. We will find out if Chito Vera is the number 1 contender after we see O'Malley versus Yan. So without doing anything, all of a sudden, I mean, right, nothing has changed for Suga Sean, but all of a sudden your argument that he hasn't fought anybody hard, that he hasn't fought a top guy, all of a sudden that's gone. You guys might recall Conor McGregor. Nobody's career, or at least nobody's path and resume, looked better with time than Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor was supposed to have an easy fight with a guy named Dustin Poirier. Conor McGregor was supposed to have an even easier fight with a young man named Max Holloway. But I do think that's relevant. I think I'm making a very fair point right now. Before you discount somebody just because you haven't heard of them, before you tell me an opponent isn't as impressive as another opponent just because you haven't watched him, or those opponents weren't yet given their opportunity. I had my first fight ever. It's an amateur fight. We didn't have weigh-ins. We didn't have gloves. I mean, this was as amateur as you get. I rematched that guy in the UFC. Now, I didn't get any credit. The guy didn't get any credit when we fought. We weren't a feature bout. We weren't a main event. We weren't in anything. But we went on to go a lot further. People just weren't familiar with us. We hadn't been given our opportunity. Right now, if you flip back on our records and go, wow, you beat that guy, it'd be really impressive to you. You go, wow, that's a great win. But at the time, oh, you beat that guy. What's that mean? He's a nobody, right? I mean, this is one of those things, and I just think that it's tough. The AFC and the NFC have this argument all the time. The NFC is superior because they've got the better teams. Who gives a damn if you've got the better teams? So you had a harder schedule. That doesn't seem like a good thing to me. It truly just doesn't seem like a good thing to me. Now, that can't carry over to all walks of your life. You got to have the right coaches. You got to have the right training partners. You got to have the right grit and adversity and deal with that in the practice room so that you're tough, so that you're prepared when something hard does come at you. But on actual fight day, on actual competition day, you have one job, and it's to win, and that's what Suga Sean's good at doing. Three to one for Petr Yan in a stand-up battle. That is an overwhelming ass-kicking. Is that really what you're telling me you think is going to happen?